In the last 4 years, there was probably no person who was as controversial worldwide as Donald Trump. The former US president had not only made headlines and caused controversy almost every day, he is even considered by many to be the worst president of all time. And although he has not been the most powerful man in the world for some time, it will hardly become quieter around him in the coming years. And as an ex-president, he must continue to follow some strict rules that make a normal life impossible. In this video, we would like to present you some of the strict rules that Donald Trump has to follow as an ex-president. We will show you, among other things, blatant security measures, serious restrictions on private life, and also why Donald Trump could even go to prison despite all these rules. It's going to get very interesting. So, stay tuned here at Wonderlane. Let's start with a rule that is probably incredibly hard for most people, but a reality for a former US president. It involves what is arguably one of the most intimate and difficult moments in a person's life: deciding how to conduct one's own funeral. While most people can probably only imagine their own funeral with their family and friends, Donald Trump has to come to terms with the fact that, whether he likes it or not, he will be laid to rest in public at a state funeral. This rule has a centuries-old tradition in the United States, and the formalities are precisely regulated by the American military. Among other things, there are specific instructions about how fast the hearse may travel, or exactly how flowers should be placed at the grave. As protocol dictates, not only the president himself is involved in the planning, but his entire family. In the case of Donald Trump, that means his still youthful son Barron himself had to participate in the preparation for his father's death ceremony. One thing that will probably already annoy Trump at his funeral is the fact that all the still living ex-presidents of the USA will be there. Many of them, such as Clinton, Bush, or Obama, are not known to be particularly attached to Trump, which could possibly become noticeable during the eulogy. Let's continue with the rule that once again shows that a president's private life will be extremely restricted after his term in office. Even though Trump can organize his everyday life as he likes, there is one normal thing that he will have to do without from now on. Trump will no longer be allowed to drive on public roads for the rest of his life. For every trip in a car, Trump has to hire the trained drivers of the Secret Service beforehand to make a trip. These drivers are precisely trained to chauffeur around presidents and are thus supposed to ensure that even ex-presidents are protected from attacks at all times. For Donald Trump, this rule could become a more severe test than for other ex-presidents. The billionaire, who is known to have made his fortune in real estate, is said to be a big car fan and to own a fleet of numerous luxury cars. Unfortunately for him, he will never be allowed to sit behind the wheel of these luxury cars again. Next, we come to a rule that Donald Trump, along with Jimmy Carter, will be only the second US president forced to abide by. It involves one of the most controversial issues of his time in office, and one that is of very high importance, especially in the current global situation: the right to health insurance. In the US, there is a rule that ensures that every person who has worked for the government for more than 5 years receives lifetime health insurance paid for by the government. But since Trump has only been in office for 4 years and never had an official government job before that, he has to pay for his own health insurance. Although this will probably not be particularly difficult for him with an estimated fortune of more than $3 billion, he must nevertheless follow this exclusive rule if he wants to remain covered by health insurance. The next rule concerns another activity that is part of normal everyday life for almost everyone, and about which very few people have to rack their brains. That is the purchase of a new smartphone. Although Donald Trump is no longer involved in political decisions after his term in office, there is still the fear that he, as the former most powerful man in the world, will fall victim to espionage attacks by hackers or hostile states. For this reason, Trump is not allowed to walk into a store and buy a new phone without further permission. He can only do so if he has previously agreed all the details with the Secret Service, which will protect the smartphone against all hacker attacks after the purchase and thus ensure that no secret information of the USA falls into foreign hands. Incidentally, this is why Trump has been advised for years to absolutely get rid of his Android phone and switch to an iPhone secured by the Secret Service. The president for a long time wanted to keep the Android phone because it was easier for him to use, according to reports. But a security advisor finally convinced him to change the device. Now we come to a rule that will massively change not only the daily life of Donald Trump himself, but also of his wife Melania and his son Barron. Because even though Trump is no longer president, he can't continue his life normally at all. The protocol for ex-presidents dictates that no matter where Trump and his family are, they must be constantly protected by Secret Service agents. Even on vacation, on a nature excursion, or out for dinner with friends, Trump will never go anywhere in his life without a host of Secret Service agents accompanying him. Even a life with spontaneous decisions is not possible anymore. All visits and activities in public must first be declared in elaborate situation meetings, and only if there is a complete security concept, the president may then pursue his daily activities. Now we come to a rule that could be fatal, especially for Trump. The following rule could not only destroy the rest of Donald Trump's life, but also create an unprecedented political situation. Namely, as an ex-president, he loses his immunity, i.e. protection from legal proceedings. As an ex-president, Trump will therefore have to answer for his public and private actions from now on. Since he not only ran afoul of the law during his time in office, but also during his time as an entrepreneur, he could now have to answer for this. Many accuse him, among other things, of evading taxes, passing intelligence information abroad, and even inciting the storming of the Capitol. If investigators and judges find more evidence for some of these accusations in the future, it is not unlikely that sooner or later Trump will have to face numerous court cases and, in the worst case, even end up in prison. So, the loss of immunity is a rule that could have huge implications for the future of Donald Trump. The next rule applies primarily to the former president's future staff. As an active president, Trump received a staggering $100 million per year, which he used to hire nearly 400 people on his advisory staff to help him with all his decisions. Even though Trump is now no longer president, like many other ex-presidents, he will likely continue to appear in public, speak, and remain politically active in some form. However, as an ex-president, he now receives only $100,000 a year instead of $100 million, which is enough for only one employee instead of 400. Even though Trump calls himself a multi-billionaire, it remains questionable whether he will continue to invest millions of dollars in his political campaign. Even when he was still president and wanted to have the falsified election results checked with the help of many employees, he did not use his own money for this. Instead, he called on his supporters to donate money to him so that he could pay his staff. Let's continue with a rule that is actually self-explanatory, but which many fear Donald Trump will not follow. As a former US president, you not only steered US policy for several years, but also gained insight into all intelligence and military secrets. Since you have information that is strictly protected from the public for the rest of your life, as an ex-president you are obligated not to share or publish any of these secrets. That being said, some fear that Donald Trump might talk a lot about confidential details of his time in office in the future, causing more political scandals. If he actually breaks this rule, numerous court cases would await him, as he could possibly be guilty of treason. Finally, let's talk about a rule for ex-presidents that will not be easy for Trump to comply with either. As a former president of the United States, you actually take on a representative role that is supposed to be politically neutral. This includes not interfering in political decisions of the current government and not criticizing it. But it is more than questionable whether Donald Trump will stick to this rule. After all, he is known for sharply attacking other politicians and often even insulting them below the belt. The billionaire has also already announced that he will be back in some form, and there is already speculation about whether he will start his own political television station or even a new political movement. Although the rule that an ex-president should not criticize politics is not officially regulated in the Constitution, it is still considered extremely impolite to interfere in political matters. And that is it for this video. Which of these rules surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time here at Wonderlane.